Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jorge Alvarez, and I'll be moderating today's webinar, 2026 SEC and FINRA Examination Priorities, Navigating a Principle-Based AI-Heavy Environment, sponsored by SurgeONE. Thank you for joining us. We know your time is valuable, and we have designed this session to be practical, grounded, and directly tied to what compliance officers and wealth management firms are facing as they prepare for upcoming exams. Over the next 30 minutes, our goal is to help you understand how regulators are thinking about the 2026 exam cycle, in particular, how the shift toward principle-based regulation and the rapid adoption of AI are changing what examiners expect firms to demonstrate around supervision, documentation, and accountability. I'm delighted to be joined today by three experts with deep experience across regulation, enforcement, and compliance technology. So first, we have Mimi Legay. She is the CEO and founder of MGL Consulting. Mimi brings decades of regulatory and exam experience and has guided countless firms through SEC and FINRA examinations. Welcome, Mimi.
Thank you.
Next, joining us again is Jeff Kern, managing partner of Shepherd Mullins New York office, where he leads the securities enforcement and litigation team. Jeff has served in senior enforcement roles at FINRA and the NYSE and brings a unique perspective on how exam findings translate into real-world consequences. Very happy to have you again, Jeff.
Happy to be here, Jorge.
Thank you. And finally, Sid Yanamandra, founder and CEO of SurgeONE. Sid is a pioneer in compliance technology with deep experience building scalable solutions for the wealth management industry and helping firms operationalize compliance in an AI-driven environment. Welcome, Sid.
Excited to kick off 2026.
Awesome. Okay, so today we'll structure our conversation around a series of focused questions. We will explore how principle-based regulation is changing exams, how regulators are evaluating AI use, and what firms should be prioritizing now to reduce risk and increase confidence going into 2026. Then we'll wrap up with a few questions from the audience. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to send them through the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we'll respond them at the end of the session. So with that, let's get started. Jeff, we're hearing the phrase principle-based regulation more than ever. From your perspective, what does this shift actually change in a real SEC or FINRA exam compared to prior years?
So we are hearing that phrase a lot, but I'm skeptical whether it's going to result in some changes. Principle-based regulation is about a regulator achieving lofty, generalized objectives through a flexible approach. It's supposed to work well in situations we're in now, where there's a lot of evolution going on, particularly technological evolution, meaning that if you apply a flexible approach, you don't have to change a rule every time there's a new technological advance. It's the opposite of ticking a box. But exams, right, at their heart, in large part, are about ticking a box. Examiners bring in with them these matrices, and they ask certain questions, and if they hear a certain answer, they tick a box, and if they don't, they tick another box. Or they go in their flow chart and they ask another question. And what they're doing is essentially correlating the behavior or the actions that they come across in the exam with a particular rule. And anybody that does this kind of work knows that both the SEC and FINRA and other regulators, like, they operate through a rule book. So I'm a little skeptical that despite as often as we hear principle-based regulation, whether it's actually at this point going to translate into a different type of exam.
Great. Any other opinions?
I agree with Jeff. It sounds good, but in practicality, I think that it's not as easy to execute as being principle-based as opposed to regulatory-based. The examiners are trained, as Jeff said, to look at various activities, and those checklists are not principle-based. They're rule-based.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, one of the things that we saw talking to a variety of clients in this space is, in the Gensler era of rules for the sake of rules, where there was rules, or what's the best way of saying? Um, Changing rules and finding organizations and doing audits, but it's trial through fire, right? There was this sort of concept of, looking at firms, dinging them for WhatsApp communications or off-channel communications, and then setting that to be the standard, right? And so the move from that to this new sort of era where we're now looking at firms, the self-regulatory type standard where firms can set their own standard and, change and implement their compliance program based on the standard that they set. And so um, I think we've heard this term a lot. And so, I get a lot of questions from various firms coming to us going, what does this mean? Does this mean that compliance goes away or checkbox-based compliance goes away and this is no longer, we don't have to worry about those massive fines that had existed before. And now, you can set your own standard. Well, we think that, if you set your own standard, you still have to prove that you're meeting that standard, which means you still have to have all the systems in place. And I agree with both Jeff and Mimi. I mean, from an exam perspective, for the examiner, they're going to ask the same set of questions, right? Show me your policies and procedures. Show me that you've got, a risk-based model. You've got a standard that you adhere by, and where's the documentation to prove that you're doing that, right? And so I think the issue though is, are we going to see the same number of enforcement actions as you had seen in the prior era as you see now? Um, and what does that change from a fear, uncertainty, and doubt perspective for organizations?
Great. Thanks so much. So following up on that, Mimi, as rulemaking slows and examiner discretion increases, what are firms most exposed today? So what are regulators really expecting firms to demonstrate when the rules are less prescriptive?
Well, the rules haven't changed. The question is whether or not we're going to get new rules, and some of that may have been stalled because we're now down to 3 commissioners at the SEC level, all 3 of which now are Republicans. So we may see less rulemaking coming out of the SEC, and in turn, less rulemaking coming out of FINRA. But the risk really is regulation by enforcement. So to the extent that there's not a new rule that comes out, there could be a more strict interpretation to a current rule, and or FINRA or the SEC can say, okay, well, we have this rule and this is the way we think it should now be applied. And they'll bring an enforcement case, for example, to set the precedent on which then other exams will follow. So as a practical matter, for the firms, the solution is really going to be document everything you're doing. Document, document, document. If you look at it from the standpoint of documenting what you're doing under your sales practices for Reg BI, your supervisory practices, and your compliance practices, firms have historically tried to address this through various checklists and spreadsheets and file memos, which create compliance gaps and record keeping issues. So what they really need to do is the best way to defend yourself in an examination and or in an enforcement action is going to be your books and records, your files. So if the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, or you've got Sally in one department keeping one spreadsheet and Fred in another keeping another spreadsheet, and those 2 spreadsheets don't talk to each other, it creates compliance gaps and regulatory problems. So a better way to do that is really to leverage technology so that everyone in compliance and management has access to the same information, and you keep copious notes throughout the process as opposed to scrambling when you get a notice that FINRA's coming in or the SEC is coming in to do an exam.
Great. Thank you. And I guess in the similar In a similar way, and this question is for Jeff. Um, whether we like it or not, AI is already embedded in many everyday workflows, right? And often informally. So how do you expect regulators to evaluate AI use in exams when firms themselves may not have full visibility into how staff are using these tools?
So I'm going to give you a little bit of a flip answer. Number one, firms should have full visibility given the stakes and given how prominent and prevalent AI is. Two, if they don't have full visibility, they should have close to full visibility. And three, if they don't have full visibility or close to full visibility, they ought to be able to at least project that they have some type of full visibility, or at least some sort of capture, some sort of mastery over it. Otherwise, I think they're going to be ripe for the picking. I mean, think about it. A regulator can cite you when something goes wrong, but a regulator can cite you even if nothing goes wrong, but your systems, your controls, your procedures aren't up to snuff. So I think in this day and age, you at least want to pay lip service. You at least want to go into an exam with updated procedures that reflect that you're on the beat, that you're cognizant of the importance, the prevalence, the prominence of AI, so that you don't get caught unawares on an exam. You got to do something. You got to go in an exam at least having done something in response to this development.
And we're seeing firms actually going out and querying their reps to find out how they're using AI or if they're using AI. Because as Jeff said, the regulators expect the firms to know whether or not their people are using it.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, I mean, I think Mimi, you hit the nail on the head even on the earlier question. The biggest issue today in the industry, and definitely, I mean, AI use is definitely one of them with the increase of LLMs, the availability of LLMs. Anybody can, use a credit card and sign up for ChatGPT. It's $20 a month. And it's a pretty good, $20 a month spend because you could do a variety of things with ChatGPT, or it could be Grok, or it could be Claude, or any of the, publicly available LLMs. But with great power comes great responsibility, because if you're going to use these tools and you are moving client data, or using it to run a risk analysis, or using it to help you build out, a portfolio, a spread portfolio model, right? So that you could de-risk your clients. Well, you're taking certain client data and you're sharing it with these models. That puts you immediately in violation of your privacy rules, right? So there is this big issue, and then a lot of firms are signing up for enterprise, AI use. So you could sign up for ChatGPT at the enterprise level and give that tool to all your employees. That still doesn't stop the employee from using their own personal model and use, $20 a month and use that to do work, because the enterprise LLM is going to be monitored by somebody in the IT department. This is akin to what had happened with the iPhone use, right? If you all recall, when the iPhone first came out, people were using Blackberries. Most enterprises were using the Blackberry, and the Blackberry was a device that was secure. It was enterprise class, and usually the enterprise IT department had full control of all the information, all the emails, everything that was happening. But people started bringing their iPhones into the office. They started connecting via mail. Now the IT guys had a problem, right? You had this big bring your own device problem, right? So we're seeing a bring your own AI problem today, with a lot of these LLMs. And so you have to have an AI use policy. You have to discover all the AI that's actually being used using discovery tools in the industry. You have to document this, to your point, Mimi, document, document, document. You have to have an AI acceptable use policy that the enterprise should have, and then you should have a way to enforce it and demonstrate that you're sticking with it. So that's a big area. I mean, I think one of the big things that we see at Surge is uh, firms increasingly wanting to build better policies and procedures. more comprehensive policies and procedures, which includes AI use and many of the other, classic rules, but not doing it with spreadsheets or managing it via email, but actually using systems of record to build this out so that they're robust. So that's a big area that I think firms are looking for and should be doing, in our opinion. Another one, Mimi, that you talked about is data sprawl, right? You've got data sitting in 9 different areas. Uh, People using 8 or 9 different tools, uh, not counting spreadsheets, which are sitting on people's computers, right? How do you put all of that in a treasure trove or your data hub, so to speak, where you can sync it, you can clean it, you could have it reproducible if a regulator asks. So this whole issue of um, data data lakes is something that a lot of organizations are now demanding because there's just so much tool sprawl. So policies and procedures, data hub, and AI use. I think these are the three big areas that we see technology actually coming to play as organizations kind of bolster what they need to do.
I agree. And I think firms need to almost think about it the same way they do the uh, e-com surveillance and off-channel communications, because whether it's an off-channel technology, whether it's technology that the firm has not approved, for example, if your firm has approved you to use certain AI tools that are enterprise-wide, but yet, to your example, you're using your personal one, the regulator is going to treat that the same way they treated off-channel communications
Right.
when you were doing unauthorized text messaging. So it creates a huge amount of risk for firms.
That's right.
Thank you. That's very very helpful. So, a question for you, Sid. So we often talk about AI risk, but data fragmentation, what we were just discussing, is a big issue, right? So, how does disconnected compliance, cybersecurity, and better data show up during exams? Why is this becoming problematic?
Look, with the rise of AI, uh, hackers are getting smarter, right? Because they can use AI tools to build out very compelling email campaigns. They could use AI tools to generate malicious code that can infect organizations, infrastructure. And so AI-based attacks are becoming increasingly prevalent, right? Um, and so cyber is definitely now becoming ever more important. It was already important, towards the back, during the pandemic era, but post-pandemic with the rise of AI, we're seeing an increase of attacks. And so organizations have to have a much better cybersecurity hygiene protocol and awareness. And this includes teaching all their employees. If you're a broker dealer, it's all your reps to pay more attention and be able to kind of bolster the cybersecurity protocol. So that's sort of a big area. The regulators are certainly emphasizing on that. The second big area is vendor risk, right? So you're only as strong as the vendors you use, right? So knowing what your vendors, who your vendors even are, and that's not just software vendors, it's just every vendor, right? Having a healthy protocol on doing due diligence on your vendors is a big area of focus, and we're seeing the regulators being very clear in that area. And I think Mimi, you touched upon AI. If we talk about software, pretty much every software company is using AI today, right? So looking at your vendor contracts, doing an inventory of every vendor and their use of AI, and how they use your data, because ultimately you're on the hook for that. Um, all of that needs to be evaluated, documented, and you got to build out a risk graph within an organization to see, where you need to focus, right? So that's another big area of focus. And then, we talked about this one already, right? AI use. Who's using AI within the organization? What AI models am I using? What do I use it for? What data am I feeding it? How am I training it? Is there any shadow AI being deployed? What data is being shared with any shadow AI models? All of this requires people to bring in experts to sort of look at all these various threat vectors and bolster that. I mean, if you look at the priorities in the 2026, some of the work that was done that FINRA put out and the SEC put out, there's been a big focus around AI use, big focus around vendor management, and definitely double clicking on the cyber risk that is now ever prevalent, right?
Great. Thank you. So let's go back to you, Jeff, with this question. So if you were advising a firm preparing for a 2026 exam, what are the first few questions you believe regulators will ask related to AI supervision and internal controls?
Yeah, they're going to ask you, tell me, where are you using AI? What risks do you think those particular uses pose? Have you created systems, controls, procedures, policies to address these risks? Have you engaged in training? Have you made any relevant AI related disclosures to stakeholders like clients, customers? Maybe an additional question is, have you appointed someone with relevant credentials in your firm to be the AI czar? So I think these are sort of the basic questions you ought to be able to answer coming into an exam. And when I say answer them in a way that speaks well of your compliance program.
Thank you.
And Jorge,
Yeah.
from the examinations that we've been involved in the end of last 2025, from both the SEC and FINRA's perspective, we're seeing the examiners requesting copies of the firm's cybersecurity policies and incident response plan, wanting to see a list of or a copy of their technology governance procedures, a list of their vendors and corresponding 17A4 disclosures, and then also a copy of their annual vendor due diligence documentation.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I mean, just to kind of add to that, I mean, that pretty much says it all right there, right? Just in terms of sort of the due diligence checklist of things that organizations need to have ready, and hopefully, you're not creating these after you've been summoned to produce them, right? So being prepared is definitely it pays. It pays to be prepared. One of the big things that we see out there with AI use, which is sort of again double clicking on that, is knowing what the use of AI is based on the application, right? So, for example, if you're using AI to help with doing portfolio risk, right? Pretty high bar. You got to have, you got to have guardrails in place. You got to have a way to test it. You might be able to, you would have to produce that, right? Now, if you're using AI to do document summarization for internal consumption, slightly lower bar, right? You're gonna, so the use case of AI has to be very clearly documented, and you got to have policies and procedures that are segmented based on the risk level of the AI model. So that all requires, I think, to what Jeff said, is you got to bring in an expert who understands this and a partner that can sort of help kind of build out these things. It just creates more work for organizations, but they're better off to have them.
Great. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So let's go to our last question as we are getting to the end of the session. Mimi, so this is more of a general question, but obviously AI is in everybody's minds at this point. So looking ahead to Q1 and Q2 of 2026, what concrete actions should firms be prioritizing now to feel confident walking into an exam later this year?
The best thing to do is to, number one, look and see when you updated your written supervisory procedures last. making sure that those are current and they address all the new regulations. The second thing is to make sure you've got your business continuity plan updated, your cybersecurity policies and incident response plan. And if you've tested your cybersecurity program during the last year, it's a great idea to have a copy of that together. If you haven't, then do a desktop type roundtable type incident, to test your program. And then make sure you've got a good list of your vendors and what due diligence you've done on those vendors and what your technology governance procedures are, because those are areas that we're seeing consistently being deficient on regulatory exams.
Anything to add there? We're actually going to move into the Q&A. So if there's anything to add in this section, we'd love to hear from you guys.
One thing I was going to mention is FINRA just sent out a notice today to members that if they're going to be examined during 2026 under the FINRA Forward initiative, they are going to start as of February 2nd, sending out a report to the membership, letting them know in which quarter can they expect their examination this year. So that's the first time they've ever done an advanced announcement on that level, but kind of an interesting to see how it's going to work.
Yeah, 100%. Perfect. Good. Thank you. Let's then move to our Q&A. Thank you so much for this part of the discussion. Really, really interesting. So let me see what questions have been submitted already. So first question, we know staff are already using tools like ChatGPT or AI note-taking apps. How realistic is it for firms to fully control this? And what level of visibility do regulators actually expect?
I think if you just look at the off-channel communications, I think the regulator is going to expect full visibility. I don't see how they can go out in the world as the regulator and expect anything less.
I agree. Firms can't stick their head in the sand and pretend their reps aren't using it. They need to get out in front of it, especially with these note-taking apps, because the problem with those is anytime you create a transcript or a summary, those become permanent records of the business. And on a broker-dealer side, under SEC Rule 17A4, firms are required to retain all written records related to their business as such. So these count as that. And regulators have already said they're going to be looking to see those. Similarly, in the event of a civil litigation or an enforcement action, those summaries and transcripts are discoverable. As Jeff and I both know that it can make the difference in an enforcement case or or arbitration when you have those transcripts that you weren't aware that somebody was making. You want to make sure you are aware of them.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, that's a fascinating subject, right, around AI note-taking tools, because there are a number of AI note-taking tools out in the industry today. Some are more tuned to the financial services use case, SEC, FINRA, and state, while there are some generalist AI note-taking tools out there as well. But this issue that Mimi brought up of summarization versus transcripts, which one is considered books and records, which ones aren't, and which tools actually keep the summaries and which ones keep both the summary and the transcript. Yeah, knowing which vendors do what, getting to that level, that's a whole different effort, because first you need to know what vendors you're using, right? Because as we discussed earlier, this whole notion of shadow applications or shadow AI use. Anyone can sign up for these AI note-taking tools, put their personal credit card and use it because that's their chosen tool, right? Like you would with Calendly or anything for calendar, keeping track of your calendar or tasks and such. You can do the same with the AI note-taking tools and not use the enterprise version. What do you do with all the data that has been collected? So we see a massive issue in the industry of discoverability of every app that your firm's using. Um, that it starts there, right? Because once you know what people are using, and I think this was a big subject of discussion, Mimi, if you recall, at the FINRA and NSCP actually, both
It was.
AI note-taking tools. What do you do? Do you always keep, just for safety purposes, do you just save it all, make it part of books and records, right? Um, and is saving too much data actually a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, there's all these questions around this because it goes back into your aging policies and data aging and lineage processing.
The other challenge is that if a firm is not required to record conversations or tape conversations, but yet they're creating transcripts, and then those transcripts, you don't know where they're being stored, you don't know who has access to them. Compliance may or may not even know they exist. It just creates a huge issue. I mean, Jeff, I'll throw it over to you as an enforcement attorney, defense attorney. What do you think about these note-taking tools?
So ultimately, I'm optimistic that they'll help out, but I think I'm sort of in the middle because I think they can giveth and they can taketh away. It depends upon what the notes say, and to your point, whether or not these particular notes were adequately stored and what the firm's system is for storing notes, because you don't want a situation where you dramatically bring out, well, we got a transcript of this, and then you find out that's the only time the firm ever saved notes. So it looks like they're cherry picking or they made it up. So I think the devil is both in the details, but the devil is in the consistency with which the firm approaches the systematic storing of storing or protocols regarding when they're going to be used and how they're going to be stored.
Well, and I think firms really have to review them carefully because with AI, sometimes you can have incorrect interpretations, especially when you have people speaking with different dialects or different accents. It can become difficult for the AI to actually create an accurate transcript. So you need somebody to be reviewing those whenever they're made and stored. And that's another thing. You don't want to be reviewing it 3 years down the road when you've produced it in a FINRA OTR.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we've seen organizations that have blanketly just said to their employees, you cannot use an AI note-taking tool because we just don't know where the risk is. We don't know, or you can only use this tool, right? This is the only tool because all their data, this vendor has done the requisite work, that the transcripts, they're all reproducible. They're in 17A4 storage somewhere, and we have access to it, right? And so then the issue becomes, how do you know that everyone's just using that tool and somebody isn't just doing something else on the side, right? So there's a lot of work happening in this space, and this is just the tip of the spear. I think this is we're starting this whole process, and I think over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a lot of different applications get sort of classified in the same manner.
I have hopefully a funny anecdote relating to what we're talking about. I found out a couple of weeks ago that the client had a meeting with FINRA enforcement and they used AI tools to record the meeting without telling FINRA. And oops. And my biggest fear is that in some exam, the FINRA examiners are going to find it, and then I don't know what's going to happen. It just Jorge, your question triggered in me that the trauma of finding that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you the other area that Jeff, this reminds me of is, there's a whole movement in technology and AI today around agents, AI agents, right? Where you can essentially hire a marketing agent, you can hire a sales agent, you can hire a compliance agent. The question is, do you get this AI agent to be registered? And does the AI agent have to have the same level of checks and balances and guardrails as a human would? So is there a Series 24 AI edition for an AI agent? Does the AI agent have to pass an exam? And so I think we're dealing with a whole new era of interesting sort of uses and intersections between technology and compliance and risk that I think organizations need to be vigilant. They need to be working with people that are ahead of the game and can anticipate some of these risks and can plan for them, right? And come up with sort of logical ways to sort of handle it. Um, Good things
Sid,
happen to people who are prepared.
to your point, Marshall Gandy from the SEC last year made the comment that if you use AI, you can't say, well, it was AI's fault. You as the human, you as the principal or the supervisor have the obligation to supervise it just as if it was a natural person. And if you allow the whatever it is it creates, whether it's a report or an advertising or anything like that, and you disseminate it, you're again responsible for it. So, but I don't disagree. It opens up some really interesting questions, including access to original books and records is another potential issue that it creates. So, yeah.
So it's such an interesting topic. I have a question for you guys. So it seems to me that as a rule of thumb, the advice for particularly smaller AIs that have less resources would be that if they're going to get AI tools, it should be wealth management tools, like, purpose-built tools rather than random. Like at least they're going to be a little more covered because those tools will have some, security features. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you're lucky to find a wealth management edition of the tools, right? Definitely, in the area of AI note taking, there are a number of vendors that are designed specifically for the advisor use case, right? Without giving a commercial to many of these firms, I mean, you can do a quick search in ChatGPT. No, I'm just kidding. And you'll get a whole list of sort of the Jumps of the world and the Zeppelins of the world, right? So there's a few of those. Um, but to find financial services optimized apps for all use cases is going to be difficult today because there are a lot of generalist AI tools that are not necessarily built for the advisor use case in mind. So I think over time this is going to shift, but it's definitely happening. What is happening though is all the classic wealth management tool providers are adopting AI in some shape or form, right? Everyone's got an AI assistant on top of their legacy software platform that they've built. Um, the question I would have in that environment is how are they using the data and who owns that data and who gave them permission to build an agent on top of their data? So there'd be a lot of questions around data use in that scenario. In fact, again, in a very similar FINRA roundtable, one area of question that a lot of people had was, if vendors are going to release AI features, do they seek our approval before they do it? And if they are going to do it, do they have to document and disclose how they used our data to optimize that AI? Right? Big question. And so we're starting to see a lot of this now. My personal view is it's better to work with tool vendors that were AI native, built in the AI age, so there isn't sort of a crossover, if you will, because then you're adopting best practices in terms of how you're building your models and how you're building your tools, versus you took a legacy tool that was built for an entirely different purpose and you're slapping AI on top. So, which actually creates some sort of regulatory risk, as well as all your contracts would have to be reviewed because when you signed the contract, there was no concept of AI, and now there is. So what do you do? Do you add an addendum? Do you go back and revisit that? And so it opens up a whole slew of issues.
Interesting. We have another question that is kind of related to what we're discussing. And the question is, If a firm has an AI policy in place, but it is still early in implementation, is that viewed favorably in an exam, or does partial execution increase risk?
So one of the conversations I have with my clients when the rubber hits the road with FINRA is, give me something to work with. Give me something to hang my hat on. And I think this is a classic example. If they have gone ahead and they've put a policy in place, and maybe it's not the best policy, maybe it needs some work. And this ties back to how we started the webinar, right? Principle-based regulation. I can at least go to the regulator and I can say, they get it. They went out and they implemented a policy. Does the policy need work? Sure. And we'd be happy to hear your input on that. But they got it right, right? Your goal is to have your firms keep up with technology, right? And so they're trying to do it. So it's better to have something you can work off of. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Give me the good, I'll work with it.
I agree.
Agreed. Makes sense.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. We're almost at the time, so let's stop here. A big thank you to Sid, Mimi, and Jeff for the thoughtful discussion, and of course, thank you to everyone who joined us today. And we hope the session, gave you a clearer picture of how regulators are approaching principle-based supervision and AI in 2026 exam cycle, and what practical steps can, firms take now to strengthen their posture. To learn more about SurgeONE's approach to combining AI with expert-led compliance support, please visit SurgeONE.ai. A replay of today's webinar will be shared with all registrants, so you can revisit the discussion or share it with your team. Thank you again for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Jeff, Mimi, and Sid.
Thank you, Jorge.
Thank you.